shows up at your front door, and he says, can I have a few minutes of your time? I've got to tell you about something. You say, oh, well, what is this? I'm busy. Well, I'm new in the area, and I perform certain services, and I think if you'll give me a few minutes of your time to explain what I do, you will agree that you cannot possibly live without the services I provide. And you say, make it quick. He says, okay. Now, it's kind of complicated. It's not quite as simple as somebody just happens to sell you a certain product, and you say, all right, can you hurry and get to the point? What services do you perform? And he says, well, that depends. You see, I and my team of other people who help me, we decide from time to time what services we think you need. And it might be that we give you food if you need it, or it might be that we help fix your car if you need it. It might be that we protect you from scary people in the world. But we decide what services that we think you need. And so you say, so I don't even know ahead of time what I'm paying for? Well, no, but you just trust that we have your best interests at heart. These services just sounds pretty weird to me. Well, what does it cost? Well, we decide on a regular basis how much it's going to cost you, and the price may change, it may fluctuate, but we'll decide that. We'll decide what the services are worth and what you should pay and what we're going to do for you, if anything. And you say, this sounds way too big. I'm not doing this. I'm not interested. Get out. He says, well, maybe I wasn't clear. I didn't get around to explaining this part. You don't actually have a choice about whether to hire us. I'm just here letting you know that we're in town and we talk to your other neighbors, and this is what we do. We will decide what services to provide for you, and we will decide the price, and we really need you to participate. I mean, your other neighbors are going along with this, and we need you to go along too and do your fair share. And you're saying, what do you mean? I don't have a choice whether to pay you or not? Like, what are you going to do if I don't? Well, we don't want to get into that, but I'll just say there can be adverse consequences if you don't pay for our services. But we don't get into that because I'm sure you want to cooperate and be part of the community and chip in and help out like a good member of the neighborhood would. And you say, this is sounding really shady and weird, and you sound like a psycho, so please get out. And slam the door in his face. He comes back the next day with somebody else. And he says, I was thinking about it, and maybe you're right. It just did come across kind of pushy last time, and I'm sorry about that. So this time I promise you're in charge. It's up to you. You're the boss. And I'm sorry if we came across as kind of pushy before. And you say, okay, so now I get to decide what services I need? Well, no, you still don't get to decide. We still decide that. Well, do I get to decide what I'm willing to pay for it? No, we still determine the price, me and my buddy here. And you still don't exactly have a choice about whether to pay for it or not. You say, that's exactly what you said yesterday. It's just, no, wait, no, it's not. No, it's not. You see, here's the arrangement. Each week, me and my buddy are going to come here, and you get to decide which one of us will be running the things that week, and we'll decide what services you need and how much it'll cost, which you do have to pay. But see, really, you're in charge, because if you don't like it one week, the next week you can decide that the other one of us will be in charge and decide what services you need. And so you're in charge, because you get a choice. I mean, isn't that what freedom is all about? You have a choice between me and my cousin Bubba. And so it's up to you. You're the boss. And you say, I'm still not the boss. You're just threatening me twice. Please go away. You slam the door in his face again. He comes back again the next day and says, maybe I didn't quite explain things right. You see, when we perform these services for you, when we decide what you need, what's best for you, what's best for the neighborhood, because sometimes it might not be you who's benefiting. It might be that someone down the street needs help, and we'll be helping them. You might not actually get any services yourself, or we might do things that you don't particularly want. But we're all in this together, so what matters is that everybody in the neighborhood participates, and in a way we're representing you, because we're deciding what's best for the neighborhood as a whole, and we're deciding what that should cost and what your fair share is, and then you pay up, or there will be adverse consequences. And you say, you keep saying adverse consequences. What do you mean? Are you threatening me, or are you just saying things will work better if I pay up? Well, we can't allow people to freeload. We can't allow people to not contribute to the good of the neighborhood. And you say, you're just threatening me. You're just the mafia. You just don't want to come out and say it. And you slam the door in his face. The next day, somebody else shows up and says, hi, I'm running for U.S. Congress. And I have some great plans of what should be done in this country. And I have some ideas of what me and my organization called the United States government can do for you. And you say, well, do I get to decide what you do for me? Well, no. You can ask, you can beg, but ultimately I decide. Well, do I get to decide how much I'm willing to pay for this? No, we decide the price, and it'll change, and it'll usually go up on a regular basis. Well, this doesn't sound like a good deal to me. Do I get a choice to not pay? No, you don't get that choice. Now, what is the difference between the two scenarios? In the first, I'm pretty sure everybody here would recognize that guy, when he shows up at your front door, and then when he shows up again with his cousin Bubba, there's something wrong with him. Like, not only is he a criminal, not only is he threatening you and being vague and weird, nobody would agree to that. Yeah, you can perform whatever services you decide to perform or not, and charge whatever you want, and hurt me if I don't pay. Nobody in their regular life would accept that. We'd all recognize that as criminal, if not downright insane, if somebody showed up at our door and suggested that. What can we conclude from the fact that almost everybody recognizes that? We can conclude that almost everybody inside is an anarchist. Because the guy who shows up at your door and says, I'm a congressman, is making the exact same deal. And the only reason anybody recognizes it as legitimate or valid at all is because they were indoctrinated by the time they were really little to think that when certain people do this insane, destructive, immoral thing, it's okay. When anybody else does it, we recognize it as this guy is a creepy, invading, attacking, thieving mafia thug. The point of my talk today is that we are all born anarchists, we all grow up as anarchists, we are all anarchists 99.9% of the time, but we are taught that there's this little weird exception that if we don't have, it's the end of the world. And how many times have you heard or even said yourself that we can't possibly survive without government? We need some sort of government or there'll be chaos and mayhem. The only ingredient government adds to the equation is somebody coming to you and say, I'm not one of those organizations that you can decide to fund, that you can say, you want to say what services you want, and you can say, I don't want that one, I do want that one. I would have wanted that one, but it's too expensive, so I'll go somewhere else. No, we're one of the organizations that gets to decide for you, for your own good, what you have to pay for. And that is the only context in which we would accept that. And I want to go through some of the other things that we only accept in the context of political mythology. Now, if two guys come to your door and said, one of us is going to rob you, but you get to choose, I don't think any of us are dumb enough to think that means we're in charge. And yet every single person who thinks democracy is a great thing thinks that we're in charge because we get to choose between two people threatening us with violence and stealing our stuff. But only in that context. Only if it's done within the rituals that we've been taught are legitimate. Well, the Constitution is there, and we have elections, and they have these big buildings, and they wear these fancy suits and say big words, so it must be real when they do it. We don't believe it when the guy and Bubba show up at the door and say, one of us is going to rob you, and that means you're in charge. But if they do enough rituals and put on an impressive enough show, most of the world believes in that and downright worships democracy. I'm here to tell you democracy is insane and one of the biggest threats to humanity because it's the guy and his cousin saying, you get to decide which one of us is going to boss you around and take your money. That doesn't mean you're in charge, and we would all recognize that in any other context. Another example of the mythology that taught to repeat the rhetoric that we say. We hear it everywhere, and if we don't hear anybody pointing out how insane it is, we accept that, well, it must be true. That must make sense. That must be, a great way, a necessary way for society to be. Oh, incidentally, I should admit, I repeated all these same goofy things. I believed all these goofy things for years and years and years. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm better than you because I know better. I look back to what I advocated and believed and assumed before with great shame, but I feel compelled to admit it because I was an anarchist my whole life but didn't know it and didn't realize it because there was this weird mythology that was stuck inside my head that completely warped my moral code, my perception of reality, and my behavior. As another example of one of the bizarre, completely bogus terms I used to say is, they represent us. Now, what government does is pass and enforce laws. It writes down a command and it says, here's what you have to do, or here's what you're not allowed to do. Here are the adverse consequences if you disobey. If you don't pay this tax, if you are caught with marijuana in the state other than Colorado, if you do this or that, or if you don't do this, if you don't register, you're this, that, or the other thing, here are the penalties. It's a fine, it's imprisonment. We're going to come do nasty things to you if you don't obey us. And specifically, taxation is you're going to give us money or we hurt you. Now, they won't ever say it in those terms. They will be the guy at the door being a weasel who won't come right out and say and specifically literally describe the arrangement, which is you're going to give us a cut of everything you earn, or eventually we're going to cage you. And the power of the indoctrination we receive can be seen in the fact that everybody knows that. On one hand, everybody knows if you don't pay tribute to the ruling class, and yes, it is a ruling class, and we don't use that term anymore, but it totally is. If you don't pay tribute, we all know bad things will happen to you. And it'll start with a letter, and oh, did you forget to file? Give us your money. And it'll get worse and worse until they get really nasty, and they'll steal your house or wipe out your bank account or stick you in a cage. We all know that. And yet, we still talk as if, well, we choose to do that, but we cooperate voluntarily. And so on the one hand, most people, they know that every law is a threat backed by the threat of is a command backed by the threat of violence. And on the other hand, it's like they don't know it. It's like we're trained not to see it because they describe it using different words. And when they say, we represent you, that is the most bizarre lie. Well, maybe the second most bizarre lie. I'll get to the first in a minute. If somebody bosses you around and hurts you if you disobey him, and takes your money and sticks you in a cage if you resist, he is not your servant. The fact that anybody needs to say that, and the fact that that conflicts with what most people believe, is just amazing to me. That there are about 300 million people that call a gang their servants when that gang bosses them around and takes their money and hurts them if they resist. And yet we repeat the mythology because we hear it everywhere. That we're really in charge. Really? Try to tax your congressman. See what happens. Find out who is in charge. You'll end up in a cage. Now, if he taxes you, you'll end up in a cage. If you tax him, you'll end up in a cage. You are not in charge. But if they can spread the mythology that makes people put up with it and imagine it to be legitimate, they can get away with a whole lot more. And so that's why we're taught to use terms that are completely inaccurate. I said there's one even more insane thing. Here's my most insane favorite thing that people say, and I don't specifically remember saying it myself, but I'm sure I did at some point. We are the government. If you can't distinguish between yourself, the victim of threats of violence, and the people threatening you, that's a great sign that you are under mind control and indoctrination. And I don't mean magical, mystical mind control. I mean, you were raised to not see reality as it is. Because to say, we are the government, is exactly as rational as being carjacked and saying, I am the carjacker. And nobody is insane enough to say that. But we're trained to say, well, we are the government because we get to choose. The ruling class says you get to choose right jackboot on your throat or left jackboot on your throat, and that means you're in charge. In any other context, we would say, no, that's bogus. And all of the excuses that are used to justify government, we can instantly see through them in any other context. And the democracy being an obvious example. Giving choice of which person is going to hurt you doesn't make it okay. Doesn't make them represent you. If the two guys on the front step sat down and wrote a very fancy piece of paper that said, wow, we shall have the power to lay and collect taxes upon you, nobody would believe it. You'd think they were off their gourd. When the people who wrote the U.S. Constitution did it, most people, including me, not only believed it, but revered a piece of parchment that pretended to give to certain human beings the right to steal and the right to do things that in our daily lives we all recognize as immoral and destructive. And the reason I say that we are all anarchists inside is because in our daily lives, outside of that weird little game called politics, we behave as if A, peaceful coexistence is the ideal, and B, we each own ourselves. Now, if somebody attacks you, you have the right to defend yourself. Most people agree on that. But if you, for example, how many people would go to their neighbor's house and say, I want a good education for my kid, I want him to go to school, and you're going to give me money or I'm going to steal your house so that I can pay for my child to go to school. We all recognize that sort of behavior as criminal, if not insane, as completely antisocial and immoral. How many people in the country will vote for a school board to impose a property tax on their neighbors, backed by the threat that the sheriff will come take their house if they don't pay to fund the school to send your kid to? So why will we view the exact same action as legitimate and noble and great? Because it is described with different words. When in our real daily lives, we know that is not how moral human beings interact. Moral human beings interact voluntarily, which is why the only moral political philosophy is actually anti-political, is voluntarism. Because anything that isn't voluntarism is, by definition, involuntarism, which is another term for violence. And if we recognize that in our daily lives as something that isn't good, how is it that we are tricked into believing that in a certain way, if we do it by certain rituals, and they have certain buildings and certain documents and have elections and stuff, that it becomes okay? This is not a country or a world of people who think it's okay to violently attack their neighbors to pay for what we want. It is a world of people who have been duped into believing that if you can vote for somebody else running for office to do the exact same thing, it's okay. And here, I know I talk to lots and lots of minarchists, and I usually offend them, but they eventually fall off the spectrum most of the time. Like I did, like I was offended thinking about these things. If the guy coming to the front door says, knock, 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 here are these services, I'm just going to do a very limited number of things for you. I'm not going to meddle in your life in any other way, and I'm just going to take a very small amount of money from you. It has nothing to do with the underlying moral principle. You would still recognize him as a thief. You don't get to steal $5 from me if I didn't agree to purchase a service from you. So the idea of limited government, in principle, is exactly the same. It's bad. It is still founded on the notion that rituals can give some people an exemption from morality. Now, to me, the destructiveness of authoritarianism and statism is not just that evil people grab a hold of it and do nasty things. I mean, if you don't know that, open a history book and turn to almost any page. You'll see that evil people are always first in line to grab positions of power and do nasty things with it. What is destructive about the belief in authoritarianism the problem isn't even the people in government. It's that being taught to believe in authoritarianism and government and all that takes decent, moral people who in their daily lives would never attack their neighbor and teaches them that if you attack them this way, if you use the mechanism of politics and voting and constitutions and appointments and legislation, if you attack them that way, not only is it okay, but they're the bad guy if they resist. If you vote for somebody and we play all the games and what comes out the other end is you're forcing them to help the poor, or you're forcing them to pay for a police force and they get hurt if they resist, that is you being tricked into betraying your own moral code, your own values. That is the problem with the belief in government. It changes good people into agents of evil every single time, because the only thing that government adds to the equation is the idea that in certain situations it's okay to attack people who haven't hurt you. It's okay to rob people who didn't do anything to anybody. And whether it's big or little, the fundamental principle, the fundamental foundation of the idea of government is that certain people have an exemption from morality. And when good people believe that, they have every reason to fuel evil. And I'll give you an example, and the two main examples are kind of obvious. If half the country is political left and they think, I care about the poor, good, I'm glad you care about the poor. I want somebody to help them, good, I'm glad you want somebody to help them. I might go around making a collection or asking people, good, excellent so far. I might vote for somebody to do what? To threaten 300 million people you don't know. To force them, not ask them, force them to hand over money for something you think is good. Now, if you wouldn't do that on your own, why would you vote for somebody else to do it? Because you were taught that if you vote for somebody to do it, it's okay. Political right. I think we need to be protected from bad guys. Me too. Foreign bad guys, local bad guys, whatever. I think we should have an organization that we can call that comes and stops people from attacking us. Me too. I think we need a tax to force people to hand over money and put them in a cage if they don't, in order to pay somebody else to stop other people from forcing those people to hand over money. Or to put it more simply, I want my neighbors robbed so that they can be protected from robbers. And the only reason we don't recognize the absolute insanity of that is because of the rhetoric and mythology that's built up since before we could even talk, that we're taught the guy with the badge on his uniform, he isn't just a person. He's allowed to do things other people can't. The guy in those big buildings that we call congressmen and judges and all the magical people have rights that we don't. They're allowed to do things by way of these weird rituals that would be evil if you did it, or I did it. As soon as there is that ability to use the state, as soon as people imagine that that's legitimate, why wouldn't you try to use that to force everybody to be better? For example, nobody here can deny that if I was elected king, and I had a big army to enforce my will, and I enacted a thing that says you have to exercise for 3 hours a day, and you have to eat this healthier diet, it would benefit the health of a whole lot of people. Does that make it justified? No. And everyone recognizes that. So don't say, well, the common good makes it okay to subjugate the individual because you don't believe that in any context other than government. Well, I'm not sure what would happen if we didn't have government doing X, Y, Z. It's one of the most popular excuses for government. I'm kind of scared of who would protect me from foreigners, from local crooks. What about the poor? What about this? How will the roads be built? Tell me, does anybody here think that they are personally justified in robbing their neighbor to build a road themselves, on their own? Because if you're not, why would you ever use the same excuse in politics and say, I can't quite picture how that would work, so I'm going to vote for somebody to rob everyone I know and 300 million people I don't know just to make sure it works out. Just because I'm not quite sure how it would work otherwise. We don't think that way in any context other than politics, because 99% of the time, we're all anarchists. And that doesn't mean chaos and mayhem and we hate society. It means we all accept that it's not okay to attack other people. That each person owns himself. The non-aggression principle of it's okay to use force to defend yourself against an attacker. It's not okay to be an attacker. We know that in our daily lives. We've been trained to imagine an exemption. The result of that over history, not just in this country, but the history of humanity, the vast majority of murder and oppression and every other kind of injustice you can think of was not paid for by tyrants. It was paid for by law-abiding taxpayer. It was not enforced by the tyrants. It was enforced by mostly good people who imagine that if you call it law, it's okay to enforce it. Evil has always been fueled by good people duped into imagining authority. If you want that evil to go away, if you want an end to war, if you want an end to oppression, you don't even have to do anything to the tyrants. You have to convince everybody else, all the decent people, that the tyrants don't have a right to rule and that we don't have an obligation to pay tribute to them or obey them. When people understand that, there will never be tyranny again. And that is why I often say, I'll say again, the problem and the solution has never been in Washington. It has never been in the state capitals. It is between the ears of 7 billion people who, because they have been indoctrinated into the cult of authoritarianism, go along with, cooperate with, advocate, and fund mass evil. When we wake up and the good people stop empowering the monster goes away. He is only powerful because we think he is powerful. So, now let's go to questions and insults and people throwing rocks. Whatever you want to do. We have a spare mic or?
No. It's all right. I'm good.
Okay, you go.
Everything that you've said is true, and doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, because truth exists independent of our beliefs. And I just wanted to let you know that that is correct. A wrong can never be turned into a right, and a right can never be turned into a wrong. And so what's wrong for me to do to you as an individual is also a wrong for a group of individuals to do to anyone.
Right. And I accidentally became a voluntarist, or anarchist is the scary word for it. Voluntarist means I want everything to be voluntary, no violence. Anyway, by figuring out that it was impossible for government to be legitimate, one of the disproofs of authority, the proof that authority, it isn't just it can be used for bad stuff, it isn't just it can be corrupted, the idea is insane. And my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, that's the whole crux of that thing. And one of the disproofs is either human beings can make an evil act into a good act, or morality is the same for everybody. And so unless, to use an extreme example, do I have the right to go around murdering people? No, I don't. Is there any way I could make it good for me to do that? If I write a document, do a ritual, and have an election, and do all these weird things, can I make murder into a good thing? And everybody instinctively understands, no, there's nothing human beings can do that can make something bad into something good. We might change our minds about bad and good along the way, but you can't alter morality. Another disproof is you can't delegate a right you don't have. Most of you probably heard these, I'll do them really quick. You can't delegate a right you don't have, which means if I don't have the right to tax you, I can't give that right to somebody else. And if people can't give rights they don't have, it means nobody in Congress has the right to tax you. If nobody had it to begin with, where the hell would they have gotten that right from? And the last one, and these are all intertwined, the last one is you can't have a moral obligation to disobey your own conscience, to do what you think is bad. So anytime the law conflicts with your judgment, your choices are go with the law and do what you think is bad, or do what you think is right and break the law. Now, if the commands of government match your moral code and your conscience, they're just irrelevant. For example, if the politicians write down on paper, you're not allowed to murder people. Well, as it happens, I think murdering people is bad. I don't really care that politicians wrote that down, and that's not the reason it's bad. And if tomorrow they wrote down, never mind, now it's good, it would still be bad. The weird rituals they do over in D.C. has nothing to do with why murder is bad. So in that case, legislation is just irrelevant. If they turn around and say, well, now it's good if you do it in certain ways, and we're going to call it national defense, they can't alter morality, which means it's illegitimate. So the commands of authority, the laws of government, legislation, are always either irrelevant or illegitimate. They either happen to match morality, and who cares? It's like we the politicians declared that 2 + 2 = 4. Well, that's nice. It already did. We didn't need you to say that, and you had no effect whatsoever on reality. Or we declare 2 + 2 = 5, in which case you're wrong. In no case does legislation ever have any bearing on what is right and wrong for anybody ever. And the very simple proof of that, and the fact that the vast majority of discussion about politics misses things that are that simple to understand. I don't go around explaining things that you need to be a brilliant rocket scientist to understand. I go around explaining things that should be self-evident to any 70-year-old. And the only reason they aren't is because of the massive indoctrination used to make people not see concepts this simple, that I own me and you own you, it's not okay for either of us to attack each other. In our daily lives, when I put it that way, almost everybody goes, yeah, duh, so? And it's not okay for you to ask him to attack me. Yeah, so? And it's not okay for you to vote for him to attack me. What do you mean? They grasp the concept, they answer the questions right, but there's a disconnect because they've been trained into the religion of government. I used to say the belief in government is analogous to a religion. It's not. It is a religion. It's a belief in a superhuman deity that you can't point to, that has rights that human beings don't, that issues commands that it is a sin to disobey. That's called a deity. Government is a religion, and it's the most dangerous, stupidest religion ever because it doesn't even pretend that there's anything supernatural about it. You ask me to disprove God, that's pretty hard. You ask me to disprove the legitimacy of government, I can do it in 2 minutes, 3 different ways. Because they don't pretend anymore the king, or God made me king. They said, well, we had a meeting and I had a document and did a ritual, and then I had the right to rule you. It's the weirdest excuse in the world, and the only reason we accept it is because we're taught it from when we're very little, and we hear everybody around repeating the mythology, and hardly anybody says, this is insane. The way we talk about it is insane. The way we think about it is insane. The good people accepting the initiation of violence against others just because it's called law is insane and is the most horribly destructive superstition in the history of the world. So it makes fun videos. What about, as one example, fire service, and how do you deal with that in a voluntary society? 2 parts to the answer. First of all, do you personally have the right to use violence against me to pay for the fire service that you want?
No.
Good. Can you delegate that right to somebody else?
No, but we can choose as a community to do that because we want fire protection.
Do you and Gordon together have the right to demand money from me under threat of force to pay for your fire company?
No.
Okay, good. We just ruled out government. Now that we've ruled it out, we can actually think like rational, responsible adults. How should we organize and cooperate so our houses don't burn down? But too often the question starts with, I want the escape route of having an authoritarian ruling class to do it because I'm not sure it'll work without it. And the trouble is, as long as we imagine that escape route to be legitimate, we use it for everything. The answer is, I don't know exactly how it'll work. I have suggestions, I could make predictions. I don't think fire prevention is all that tough. I actually grew up in a town where it's private, and it's so good that they help all the surrounding towns that are all tax funded that don't do as good a job because they're nice. The one in the town I grew up in, they go to other towns that can't possibly have paid them. They don't even live there. They don't even know about it. And the thing is, and this is the other thing I was going to get to, but I was rambling on and on, so I cut it short, is I like to do it. I had done events where I would do an example of, imagine everybody in this room, we're it. We landed on an island. We're all there is. There's no cops, there's no 911, there's no authority, there's no government. And then I would go through, this is when I would do day-long events, so we had time to go through in detail, which we don't here. How do we deal with things? And let's say fires start, whether some person is starting them or lightning is starting them. What do we do about it? In that context, and we would go through, there's a poor person who needs help, there's some guy stealing stuff. We go through all these scenarios. Never once did anybody in any of the events suggest a government solution. Because the government solution to any problem is, first of all, I get to tell you what to do and hurt you if you disobey. I get to take what you've produced and hurt you if you don't hand it over, and then I'll decide what to do with it. Because everyone in any other context other than politics recognizes that as immoral. In the island scenario, it doesn't even occur to anybody. Republicans, Democrats, whatever flavor of status they might be, libertarian, anarchist, it doesn't occur to anybody to start with, I get to boss everybody around, because we know that's not okay. Without that as the starting point, they're really darn good at figuring out solutions to almost everything. Well, we don't want our huts burning down, so what if we organize and we'll make some buckets or something to get water, and people figure things out. But if they have the crutch of government, which is, well, let's have a central plan that's forced on everybody so I don't have to think about it, so I can get a guarantee, even though government guarantees are utterly worthless, but they give them, don't worry, we'll protect you. And somebody breaks into your house, well, we didn't actually have to protect you, but at least we took lots of your money to build a big police force to save you. And the fire company may not be there in time to save your house. But at least we'll have a big thing that forces you to pay for it whether they show up or not, and forces everybody else to pay for it whether they want to do it or not. The problem with the belief in government is that it makes everybody's first choice, whenever there's an unknown and a worry, and I'm not trying to downplay the concern, that one or any other, of what do we do about fires? It's a serious thing. What do we do about criminals? What do we do about helping the poor so they don't starve to death? And on and on. I'm not downplaying those concerns at all. I'm saying that when we believe in government and authority, our first choice will be immoral, which is, let's have a centralized idea forced on everybody to make sure this is taken care of. And if we don't have that philosophical crutch, almost everybody does way better and can, on their own, in 5 minutes, think of a better solution than government ever does. The thing that's often left out of the concern about, well, what about, let's say there's no government, there's no ruling class, but some guy gets power. He convinces other people to be his thugs and he's going to be big and scary. What most people fail to realize is the massive factor that the belief in authority plays. And one example I like to use is, suppose you're a nasty bad guy and the resources you have are 100,000 underlings who will do your bidding. However, only 2,000 of them are armed, and your goal is to steal $2 trillion a year from 100 million people.
The IRS?
Yes, except you don't get the benefit of having your victims imagine an obligation to pay tribute to you. You're doomed. You don't have the slightest chance in the world of running such an extortion racket.